We're going to look today at the last session. The last session is all about navigating change, but just let's briefly go through what we've been talking about over the last 5 weeks. We started off the first half-hour session with the unlocking true potential, and we talked about creating self-awareness, about limiting beliefs and how limiting beliefs hold us back. We all have beliefs about ourselves that tend to be unquestioned for years and years and years. What do you truly believe about yourself? You remember I told you the story about as a school child, I was told I couldn't write, and I didn't write my first book until I was 45 years old because I believed that I couldn't write. Turns out I actually can, but that's another thing. Then the next session, we looked about breaking through. Once we've identified those limiting beliefs, now we have to reframe, take consistent action to build confidence, and regularly apply the techniques to get past those limiting beliefs in order to achieve whatever we want to achieve. In the third session, we looked about mastering time. We talked about looking at the various different time techniques and managing our time, because there's so much we can be doing, and so often we say we just don't have the time to do it. We talked about the Eisenhower matrix and the Pomodoro effect. I amused my family last week by talking about the Pomodoro effect. Then after 4 sessions at 25 minutes each session, I went out and planted my tomatoes in the garden, which was obviously another Pomodoro effect. If you don't understand the reference, I better just move on because it's not much of a joke. If you don't understand the reference. All right, let's move on. Then last week we talked about moving or setting goals and then putting those goals in place by taking action to make them work. This week we're going to be talking about change, navigating change, making sure we can thrive in what is effectively uncertainty. And so today I want to go through that whole process of change. Now, change is inevitable. Change has always been there. It's just getting faster and faster. There's a lovely story about Kenneth Boulding. He's an economist, I beg your pardon. Now, he says this: the date that divides all human experience is well within our lifetimes. Just think that through for a second. If you imagine that human experience has been going for the last 100,000 years, he's suggesting that the date that divides that into 2 equal parts is well within the last 50 years. That means we have had more change in the last 50 years than has in the previous 100,000. Horrifying, but probably true. Hard to measure. What is true, however, is in the average Sunday newspaper, there is more information than the average person would have gleaned in their lifetime 100 years ago in just one Sunday newspaper. We are bombarded with information. We are bombarded with change. Change is just always there. It's always happening. One of our challenges, and this is something that we will have to face as we go through here today, is an Einstein quote, and I'm hoping I've got this right. My wife is going to give me a hard time for getting it wrong. But we can't solve problems by using the same thinking that created those problems. So if we want to solve our problems, we have to change. We have to do things differently. Now, the reason we're gathered here together today is because we want to move ahead. We want to do things differently. We want to get different results. And that means we have to embrace change. It is as simple as that. But it's always been that simple. Fascinatingly, this is a Charles Darwin quote going back 150 years, I imagine. It's not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent, but rather the most responsive to change. So what does that mean? It means that if we want to survive as individuals, we need to change. If we want to survive as humanity, we're going to have to change. But I can't do that. I can help individuals change. That's my job. That was Charles Darwin, 1860 or something like that. So what are we going to do? Well, if we are moving into a changing environment, and hopefully if you have set new goals, started to take action to apply those goals, things are already changing for you. Now, if we're going to move into a changing environment, there are 7 predictable symptoms of change. That means that we can predict what's going to happen or how we're going to feel when we move into a changing environment. Now, we're all changing from one thing to another, but I want you just to imagine that you may well have to change your job, or perhaps start a new business, or change your personal life, start with a new partner, perhaps, or get rid of an old one. Whatever else you have to do, we can predict how you're going to feel. The first thing is, of course, you're going to feel alone. This is very predictable. Now, I'm not an AA member, but I understand from a friend who is actually an AA member and has battled with alcoholism when he was younger. They will say that the 7 predictable symptoms of change are just the same if you're giving up something, like in that case, giving up alcohol. The first thing you feel is alone. You feel as though you're the only person going through this. And that's a challenge. You're not alone, of course, and that's why AA exists. And that's why they put accountability partners together so that people know that they're not alone. But you will feel alone if you're going into a changing environment. You will feel awkward. It's a bit like, imagine you're sitting in your own lounge at home and there's a power cut. Now, we don't have to imagine power cuts because we've had them, but not recently, which is truly wonderful. However, imagine you're sitting in the lounge and all the lights go out. The TV goes off, it's dark outside, middle of winter, dark outside, and it's pitch black in the house now. Now, that's a changing environment, and you will feel awkward. You know everything in the room, you know where all the furniture is, but in order to get up and see if it's just a fuse gone, you will get up, but you'll feel awkward and feel uncomfortable. You'll feel your way around that coffee table that you know is there, but you don't want to kick your ankles on the table legs. So you will feel and very carefully feel your way in order to get to the consumer unit in the kitchen to fix whatever the problem it is. People feel awkward when they're under changing circumstances because the future is not predictable. They don't know what's going to happen next. So they feel awkward. Then the next thing is there's a sense of loss. It's inevitable that people will look back and feel that they have lost something. In any changing situation, there is that sense of loss. And it's often the source of challenges around the world, because people want to go back to the way it was in the past, because the way it was in the past was better. It wasn't better, probably, but that's just the way people feel about change. Worry is one of those other things that happen with changing situations. You worry about what might happen in the future, because you cannot predict it. You're not in a predicted situation, so you worry about what happens in the future. Some people are really good at worrying. Some people have turned worry into a lifetime passion. But the problem here is 90% of the things you worry about will never happen. But we worry anyway, and we've got to get beyond that. So change there, we know change is going to happen. We know we can predict those. There are other predictable symptoms of change. We're not going to go through the whole lot now. But we know change is going to happen. And there are 2 types of people going into any change situation. We have change winners, and then we have change casualties. Now, the vast majority of people don't like change, and they become change casualties. What does that mean? Excuse me. Change casualties will be those sorts of people, and we have seen them everywhere. Change casualties are the what if people. You know, you're proposing something new in the future. Change casualties will say, well, what if it goes wrong? What if the wheels drop off? What if the rand changes against the dollar? The what if people are surrounding us. And we have to be careful, because the answer to that question is, well, yes, it probably will. Things will probably go wrong. And then when they go wrong, we will make new decisions and move forward. We talked a lot about that and making mistakes last week in taking action and creating the right goals to move forward on. So you will get those what if people trying to hold you back to stay in the situation they're in rather than wanting to change. Then you have the victims. Victims are everywhere. Sometimes we become victims ourselves. The victims are those people who blame everybody else for what's happening to them. It's all your fault. Or I would have done better if you hadn't been there doing this, that, or the other. There are plenty of victims out there. And if you're in a working environment, you will hear 2 or 3 victim statements every day at work. My report was late because the printer was broken. Nonsense. Your report was late because you didn't take into account that the printer might get broken. So we blame other people or other things. We can't go out to a restaurant tonight, darling, because restaurants are too expensive. It's not your fault for not earning enough money. You become a victim. It is too easy to do. Change casualties will often become doom and gloom merchants. That means they want to sell their doom and gloom. They don't want to be doomy and gloomy on their own. They want everybody else in the world to be doomy and gloomy as well. So those doom and gloom merchants, again, and any group of people, there'll be 1 or 2 people who say, well, it's bound to go wrong. There is no chance of this working. It's going to be chaos out there. There's doom and gloom merchants. The other type of change casualties you will often come across are the yes buts. Have you heard that before? You try and put forward a new idea and they say, yes, but have you heard about this? Oh, yes, but it went wrong in the past. It's not going to work in the future. Now, those are those change casualties. Now, there's a little bit of change casualty in all of us. Just be careful here. But it's our job to make sure that we are not change casualties, we are change winners. So what is a change winner? What is the difference between a change winner? Well, change winners are those people that always anticipate the future. We're not looking at the past and wishing that we could go back and experience what we had in the past. We are looking towards the future and looking to anticipate a glorious future. That's the way in which change winners work. Now, it may not always be as glorious as you hoped that it would. It doesn't matter. We look at a positive way to the future, and by doing that, we are much more likely to create our own positive future. If, on the other hand, a change casualty will look at the future and say, well, it's bound to go wrong, there's a very good chance it will go wrong. And the challenge with change casualties is when they predict that it might go wrong and then it does, they're so proud of themselves for getting it right. I told you it would go wrong and it did. I told you the wheels would drop off and they did. I was right all the time. Have you noticed that about some of your friends? We surround ourselves sometimes with people who are happy things go wrong because they predicted that they would. Horrifying, but we all know people like that, don't we? Then there's, so it's a constant anticipation of a positive future. Change winners are active, or rather proactive. We're going to talk a little bit more about that, so I'm going to come back to that in a second. Change winners also start with the end in mind. I think this was Stephen Covey's number 7 of the 7 habits. Those of us who are old enough to remember reading that book. Bless him, he's no longer with us, Stephen, great guy, but his son is now running the Stephen Covey company and doing a lot of speaking on his behalf, which is wonderful. But that number 7, to start with the end in mind, have that idea of a positive future in mind and then work towards that. And I think we've already talked about that, but in decision making, we have what we call a future perfect decision. You want to achieve something grand and glorious in the future. I gave you the example of president of Microsoft, I think, last time round. But you want to work towards that. You put yourself in that future that you want to work towards, and then you take step by step back and see how you got there. So you start with the end in mind, and then each step will be working towards that end in mind that you've already considered. So that's the process of becoming a change winner, is to make sure you've got all these things. And then in order to give yourself that sturdy roots, in order to accept change, it is very good to have those values that we talked about right up front. In day 1 of this 5-week session, we talked about having values. And if you remember, I said, get that A6 book out that you write in every night about all the things that you have done that you're proud of during the day, not negative things, all positive things. Do that every single day. And then over 2 or 3 weeks, hopefully you've been doing this. Over 2 or 3 weeks, you can look back at that book, see what you're proud of. And what happens is that your core values tend to bubble to the top. You can see truly what you really value in your life. And if you have those core values, that gives you the roots that hold you, that will help you move forward in any changing environment. Very powerful to have that. Okay, so we're faced with change. Oh, excuse me. We're faced with a changing environment. Now we've got to help ourselves through that changing environment. Now, change is always opportunity. Anytime things change, you can focus on the things like change casualties will do, looking back at the past, wishing that we'd go back to the past because it was better, or you can focus on the future and ask yourself, well, this is a changing environment. What are the opportunities that changing environment will create? Change is always opportunities. Most people don't do this. One of the biggest changes around the world that we've all been affected by 2 or 3 years ago, obviously, was the COVID pandemic. And if you look back at that, you'll see people moving into their houses, locking the front door, sitting on their own, moaning about how bad this is, and it's the government's fault, and they should have done things better, and all of that. There's plenty of that. And if you like to listen to TikTok or other things, in those days you will have heard all of those people talking about the bad things and whose fault it was. Some people, however, said, change is opportunity. Big change around the world. What are the opportunities out there? And there are hundreds of things that people did to take advantage of that opportunity. So Zoom was one of them, of course, and Zoom now is huge. And we probably, it is suggested that we wouldn't have got so far with this sort of communication, live communication on Zoom or Teams or any of the other things, if it hadn't been for COVID forcing us into that position. I know in my own case, I was running seminars around the country when COVID hit. I couldn't do that. Suddenly, I had to cancel all of my hotel rooms and all of that stuff around the country, moved straight onto Zoom, and within 2 weeks, we were running online seminars. That's just a normal thing now, but that was very, very new and different in whenever it was, 2020, I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago. It was very, very different. A friend of mine, within 2 or 3 weeks, had started a new hand sanitizer business. Brilliant, very, very clever. It didn't last long, 6 or 8 months, but he did very well over those 6 or 8 months, until everybody was selling hand sanitizers, and then he did something else. That is why change is opportunity. And how do we take advantage of that opportunity? We get active. We get active. Activity is the mother of opportunity. If you're in a changing situation, get active. If you lose your job for whatever reason, get active. Don't just sit at home moping, complaining that they no longer need widget makers, so you've lost your job. You will list 100 companies you'd like to work for. Find out who are the decision makers of those companies. Write a personal letter to each one of those decision makers. And then when that may or may not work, find another 100 companies. You get active. You don't wait for the jobs to pop up in the newspaper. You get active and you drive your own future. If you, for whatever reason, lose your partner, get active. Join loads of clubs. Meet lots of new people. Start to do many, many more things. You don't sit at home and wait for things to work for you. You get active. The more activity you've got, the more opportunities will present themselves to you. It is as simple as that. But change winners get proactive. Change winners are taking action in advance. They're proactive. A change winner, if a change winner would anticipate that there is no longer a need for widget makers, so they would retrain in advance. Change winners are looking to the future and are much more likely to benefit from that future because they've anticipated the future and they're taking action in advance. So activity is the mother of opportunity. Very important to get that right. Okay, we're winding down again. I see 25 minutes have gone past. It's amazing how quickly time goes when you're having fun. Well, I'm having fun anyway. I'm just going to briefly summarize what we've looked at, but you'll notice we have Breeder in the room today, and I'm going to ask Breeder to put his sound on. Breeder and I have been working together for the last, I think, 10, 12 weeks. He came to me and I've been coaching him, and I thought it would be a good idea to get Breeder to come on this afternoon, this morning, and tell us a little bit of his experience as being coached by me. Breeder, you're on.
Thank you, Richard. Yeah, I just want to add one thing, and everything you say about change is so profound. But the one thing that you've helped me with is actually effective change, because it's easy to just randomly change a million things. But what you've helped me do is do effective change. So you help me see what are the things that if I change those, they are the low-hanging fruit. So for instance, you helped me and inspired me. I've always wanted to write a book, didn't think I would be able to do it. And you helped me make it happen. So I wrote the book. By writing the book, it organized my thoughts in my business. And so now when I apply things, I do it in a more organized manner. And then secondly, you keep driving me to do more things that possibly you think maybe later or you're not sure you could do it. And I keep doing it. So now instead of wondering where the next project or next deal will come from, I actually totally relax, knowing that I keep improving myself and I keep thinking on a better level. So I'm no longer worried because what I'm doing will inevitably work just because I'm doing it on a more effective and elevated level. So thank you for that. You've made a huge difference in my life. And you can ask Richard. I asked him the other day if I can sign up for a year's worth of coaching, because each time I think, oh, that was enough. And then with each lesson, it drives me forward. So well, that's my words on Richard. Yes.
Perfect. Well done. Just as I paid you to do. Thank you very much, Breeder. All right, folks. I just wanted to get Breeder on board. I'm running a few coaching sessions at the moment. Breeder was available, so thank you for coming in and sharing a few things. And maybe you picked up one or two things as well today as well. Okay, so what have we done today? We talked about change. Change is inevitable. That is it. Just accept it. It will never be the same tomorrow as it was yesterday. It's always going to be different. The symptoms of change, if you know the symptoms of change, you know that you're going to feel alone, you're going to feel awkward, you're going to worry probably a little bit, then if you know that, then it helps you to accept that those things and then take action. If you're feeling alone, well, stop feeling alone. Go and spend time with your friends. Go and make new friends. Join new clubs. The symptoms of change are inevitable. But change is always opportunity. And I think that if we have that opportunity to change, then if we see those opportunities, we've got to take them. And they may not work. It may be a mistake. And we talked about this on session 2 or 3. Mistakes aren't bad things. This mistake is just another way of you learning something new. So grasp those opportunities when they come. Action, take action. Action is the mother of opportunities. So take as much action as appropriate. Become a change winner. We cannot afford to be a change casualty. Become a change winner. It's the only way these things are going to make sense. And as you can see from the clock on the bottom left-hand corner of the slide, aren't you impressed by the way I put that clock on there? As you can see from that clock, it's coming up to 9:30. So questions, any questions anybody wants to ask, and then I shall wind it all up. Questions, anybody? Put them in the chat box if you have questions, or you can talk if you're put your microphone on. Anybody got any questions? Okay, all right. There's plenty of time for questions because, as I've mentioned before, if you want to, please book some time with me. The first 30-minute session is free, of course. I'm not going to try and sell you anything more. If you want to have a chat to me about anything at all, free of charge, book an appointment on my website. Just go to richardmulvey.com. You can book an appointment with me. It's got my diary there. Book an appointment anytime it suits you for 30 minutes. I won't try and sell you anything. I just want to help. And if you have questions or things you'd like to ask or ways in which you want to go in the future, I'd be delighted to have a one-on-one chat with you. So that's a 30-minute session if you want to. If you're not, that's fine. Just very briefly, we've got 30 seconds more, and so I'm going to go through what we've achieved over the last 5 weeks. In session 1, we looked at daily reflection, writing that journal at the end of the day, and we also explored meditation briefly. Meditation's very powerful. And I'll be very happy to help you with, if you can't meditate or you're battling to work out how it works, come and chat to me and I'll guide you through that process. Challenge those limiting beliefs. We all have them. Identify them, challenge them. Do I really believe that about myself? And then implement a growth mindset. You have to, a growth mindset strategy. Always be looking to the future, always be thinking about growth. Doesn't matter how old we are. There's always potential to move forward. In session 2, we looked at reframing that fear. We again looked at making mistakes and them saying, well, it's not such a bad thing to make mistakes. It's not just learning. You're moving into an unpredicted future, which is fascinating. Constant actions to build your confidence. Always be taking those little steps. You get them right, move ahead. Little steps all the time. If you're battling with the big ones, break it down into little ones. And then make sure you're doing this daily, not just once a week or once a month. These things must be done daily. In session 3, we talked about managing your time, looking at the Eisenhower matrix and things that are important or urgent and balancing those correctly. And the Pomodoro effect. And Pomodoro, as we all know, is Italian for tomato, which is why I made that stupid joke. Session 4, we looked at goals. And then ask the big question, why? Once you set a goal, you've got to ask yourself, why do you want to achieve that? And then when you come to the conclusion of why, well, what's the next why? and you will always drill down to happiness. It'll always be that you want to become happier. And so then go back, once you've said that, and say, well, is this really going to make me happy? Because if it's not, then let's not do it. Let's work on other things. Then on this session, we talked about change being inevitable. Now, you're going to get used to it. You have to get used to it. Let's move forward and accept change as being inevitable, and then take the opportunities that change will always provide for us.